Jack Turner only wanted a quiet meal that summer night in Dallas. But when a bald, heavy-set man struck a frightened young girl inside the diner, the room went silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Except Jack, a Navy SEAL trained for war, yet haunted by the wars inside his own here. At his side, his German shepherd, Ranger, growled, a warning from heaven itself. That single moment would ignite a storm far beyond the diner's walls. What happens next will make you believe again that miracles don't always come from angels. Sometimes they wear a uniform. Subscribe, like, and share this story of faith and courage. The summer heat over Dallas shimmered like molten glass. Asphalt streets rippled beneath a sun that refused to show mercy, and the small Blue Star diner sat in its haze like a mirage of chrome and fading paint. Inside, the scent of frying bacon, coffee, and human fatigue blended into something both comforting and sad. It was the kind of place where working men came to forget and lonely souls came to be seen. At booth 3, Ray Haskins sat hunched over a plate of half-eaten pancakes, sweat glistening on his bald scalp. He was a man of bulk and breadth, with arms like meat hooks and a gut pressed tight against his dirty white t-shirt. His skin carried the reddish tint of a lifetime spent under punishing sun and cheap whiskey. The deep cracks around his mouth told the story of someone who had smiled rarely and shouted often. Once, Ray had been a construction foreman, a man used to power, giving orders, taking none. But after the injury that shattered his knee 5 years ago, he never found his footing again. The bitterness that followed didn't stay silent. It needed someone smaller to feed on. Sitting across from him was Lila, his 12-year-old stepdaughter, her small hands folded nervously in her lap. She had light brown hair, unevenly cut as if by her own trembling fingers, and eyes the color of quiet rain, a strange mix of gray and innocence. The bruises on her wrist were fading but visible. Her dress, a pale yellow cotton thing too big for her, hung loosely on a body that hadn't had enough to eat in weeks. Every motion she made seemed careful, rehearsed, as though she had learned that even breathing too loudly could invite punishment. She glanced at Ray, praying he'd stay calm. Ray counted crumpled bills on the table. $8, he muttered, voice thick with disgust. 8 lousy bucks after a whole damn day? He slapped the money down, the sound echoing across the room. Conversations died mid-sentence. The waitress by the counter froze, her hand hovering over the coffee pot. No one dared to move. Ray leaned closer, his breath sour with beer. You think I feed you for free, huh? You think this is charity? Lila swallowed hard. Her voice came out as a whisper. I tried. The ice cream man said. The sentence never finished. His hand came fast and flat, striking her cheek. The blow wasn't just a sound. It was a shock wave. Her head snapped sideways, and the small silver spoon she'd been clutching fell to the floor, spinning before coming to rest near the booth's edge. Silence fell heavy as dust. The ceiling fan above them whirred helplessly. At the far corner of the diner, Jack Turner looked up from his cup of black coffee. He was a man built from quiet storms. Mid-40s, tall, lean in that coiled way soldiers carry their strength, his skin sun-worn and faintly scarred from years spent in foreign deserts. His dark hair, flecked with gray, was cropped close, his jawline shadowed with 2 days' worth of stubble. He had once been a Navy SEAL, long deployments, silent kills, and a moral compass forged in chaos. After retirement, he'd come to Dallas seeking peace, a promise to his late wife that he'd stop fighting. But some instincts never retired. Beside him lay Ranger, his German shepherd, 6 years old and battle-trained, his coat a mix of sable and tan, eyes alert but calm. The dog's ears twitched at the sound of the slap, a low growl forming deep in his chest. Ranger was no ordinary companion. He had served alongside Jack in Afghanistan, sniffing explosives, tracking the lost, and surviving ambushes that left both with scars inside and out. The bond between them was the kind born from nights when survival depended on trust alone. Jack's fingers tightened around his mug. The ceramic creaked softly under the pressure. He could feel the room's paralysis, the fear that had taught these people silence. Every muscle in his body whispered the same truth. Some evils thrive because good men look away. He rose slowly, the chair scraping against the linoleum. Ray noticed the movement, his thick neck rolling as he turned. "What the hell you looking at, cowboy?" Jack's tone was calm, almost gentle. "A man hitting a child," he said, his voice steady like a drawn blade. "And wondering if that man forgot what it means to be human." A ripple went through the diner. The waitress, Mara, a petite woman in her 30s with tired hazel eyes, froze near the counter. She'd seen fights before, drunks, lovers, broken promises, but this was different. The air itself felt charged. Ray barked out a laugh, forced and ugly. "This ain't your business, stranger. You don't know me." Jack took one step closer. Ranger stood now, silent, his gaze locked on Ray like a shadow preparing to strike. "I don't need to know you," Jack said. "I know what you are." The words hit Ray harder than any fist. For a moment, his smirk faltered. Then rage replaced it. He lunged from the booth, clumsy but dangerous. Jack moved like water, sidestepped, gripped Ray's wrist, and twisted. The sound of pain tore through the diner. Plates clattered. Ranger advanced one step, teeth bared just enough to send the message. One more move, and it's over. "Sit down," Jack ordered. The tone wasn't loud, but it carried command, the voice of someone used to being obeyed. Ray hesitated, breathing hard, eyes darting to the people watching, to the waitress with the phone in her hand. Then he sank back into the booth, muttering curses. Jack turned to Lila, his voice softening. "You okay, sweetheart?" She nodded quickly, but tears streaked her dusty face. Ranger lowered his head to her level, tail barely wagging, a silent comfort. The police arrived minutes later, sirens cutting through the heavy heat. 2 officers entered, one younger, eager, the other older, suspiciously indifferent. They took statements, though the older cop's eyes lingered, too long on Ray, as if he already knew him. Jack caught that glance, filed it away. Something about this smelled wrong. As the officers led Ray outside, shouting about family disputes and private matters, Jack stayed by Lila's side until social services arrived. She clung to Ranger, fingers buried in the thick fur around his neck. For the first time that day, she stopped shaking. When the diner emptied, Mara approached Jack, voice trembling. "Thank you. Nobody ever stands up to that man." Jack just nodded. Somebody had to. He left a 20 on the counter beside his untouched coffee and stepped out into the glaring sun. The asphalt radiated heat, but a cooler wind was coming. Behind him, the faint sound of Lila's laughter, small, unsure, but real, followed him into the day. That night, alone in his modest apartment, Jack lay awake. He couldn't shake the image of that bruise on her cheek, or the indifference of the cop who had shrugged it off. He'd promised to stay away from trouble, but he also knew what it looked like when the system failed. Ranger rested his head on Jack's arm, eyes half closed. Jack sighed. "Guess we're not done fighting yet, buddy." The dog's tail thumped once. Outside, Thunder rolled in the distance, promising more than just rain. The rain that had threatened all night finally came at dawn, drenching the streets of Dallas in a curtain of silver. It washed the heat from the air, but not from Jack Turner's mind. He sat on the small balcony of his apartment, a mug of black coffee in hand, watching the world shimmer through the drizzle. Ranger lay nearby, nose resting on his paws, eyes half open, always alert, never asleep. Jack hadn't been able to shake the look on the older officer's face the night before. It wasn't just indifference, it was recognition. That cop had looked at Ray Haskins not like a stranger, but like an asset. By 9 a.m., Jack was parked outside the police precinct, his truck blending into a line of weary sedans. He wasn't there for confrontation, yet. He wanted to see what kind of town this really was. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed faintly, flickering over tired faces and forms stacked too high. Behind the front desk sat Officer Maria Santos, a woman in her mid-30s with a sturdy frame and steady eyes. Her black hair was tied in a neat braid, and though she wore her uniform crisp, the dark circles under her eyes told of long shifts and too many disappointments. She looked up as Jack approached. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm looking for information about a girl, Lila Haskins. She was brought in last night after a domestic assault at the Blue Star Diner." Maria's expression shifted subtly. "And you are?" "Jack Turner," he replied, calm but firm. "I'm the one who stopped it." Recognition flickered. She nodded once, quietly respectful. "Right. The ex-SEAL. We heard about you. Look, officially, the case is being handled by Detective Raleigh. But if you're hoping for justice, I'd keep my expectations low." Jack frowned. "Why's that?" Maria hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. Her voice dropped. "Because Ray Haskins works for the city's maintenance department, under contract with Chief Raleigh's cousin. The last man who tried to file against him got his car impounded and his dog poisoned. This town protects its own." Before Jack could respond, a door banged open at the far end of the hallway. Detective Frank Raleigh strode out, a man in his late 50s with a gut he carried like a badge of seniority. His tan suit strained at the buttons, and his gray mustache was clipped with military precision. But his eyes were something else. Pale, calculating, and cold. Years of half-truths and payoffs had worn him smooth on the outside and hollow within. "Something I can do for you?" Raleigh asked, voice slick as oil. Jack turned to face him. "You can tell me why the man who hit that girl walked out of here 20 minutes after I brought her in." Raleigh's lips curved into what might have been a smile. "No charges filed. The mother declined to press." Jack's jaw tightened. "She's dead, Raleigh. Been gone 2 years." The detective blinked once, unbothered. "Then I suppose the paperwork's mistaken. Either way, it's out of my hands." He leaned closer, the faint smell of cologne failing to cover whiskey. "Piece of advice, soldier. This isn't your war. Go back to wherever you're hiding and let the locals handle their own mess." Jack's stare didn't move. "I've seen this kind of rot before. It doesn't end until someone digs it out." Raleigh chuckled, turning away. "Then bring a big shovel." When he was gone, Maria exhaled slowly. "You should watch yourself. He's connected. His brother-in-law runs city contracts. His nephew manages evidence intake. It's all one circle." Jack nodded, quietly grateful. "Then I'll start looking outside the circle." He left the precinct, mind already building a picture of the network. Corruption wasn't new to him. He'd seen warlords, black markets, and politics far deadlier. The difference was, this time, It was hiding behind uniforms instead of flags. That afternoon, he found Lila at the temporary foster center, a pale blue house run by Miss Eleanor Pike, a retired nurse in her late 60s. She was tall and lean, her white hair tied in a bun, her voice soft but unwavering. She had the look of someone who'd seen every shade of pain but never stopped believing in people. When Jack knocked, she met him with cautious curiosity. "You're the man from the diner," she said, not as a question but as recognition. "Yes, ma'am. I came to check on the girl." Eleanor studied him for a long moment, then opened the door wider. Inside, the air smelled of lavender and soap. Lila sat at a small table coloring a picture of a dog, its fur a mix of brown and black. Ranger, sitting by Jack's side, wagged his tail once, and Lila's face lit up with the first true smile he'd seen from her. "She's quiet," Eleanor said softly. "But she's strong. Hasn't asked for her stepfather once. Only kept saying she's sorry for making trouble." Jack's throat tightened. That's not her fault. None of this is. Eleanor nodded. "I know. But you should also know. Someone called here this morning asking about her. Claimed to be family. I didn't like the tone, so I said nothing." Jack's instincts flared. "Male voice?" "Yes, deep, angry. Ray." He wasn't done. That night, Jack parked his truck across from the Foster house. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and glistening under the sodium lights. Ranger sat alert in the passenger seat, eyes tracking movement in the shadows. At midnight, a rusted van rolled slowly down the block, its headlights dimmed. Jack noted the plate, memorizing it. The van idled near the corner before slipping away. By dawn, Jack had a plan. He called Maria Santos. "I need access to Ray Haskins's employment files, anything that ties him to Raleigh or city contracts." "That's not exactly public info," she replied nervously. "Then do it off the record. For the girl." There was silence, then a quiet exhale. "You didn't hear this from me, but check a warehouse on Cobalt Street. City uses it as equipment storage, but no one's seen a delivery in years." Jack's voice hardened. "Understood." He hung up, glanced at Ranger. "Looks like we've got work again." Ranger tilted his head, ears twitching, as if he already knew. Jack reached out and patted his neck. "This time, we don't need permission." As the sun rose, bleeding orange over the skyline, the war Jack thought he'd left behind came roaring back. Not with gunfire, but with secrets buried under city paper and broken children's cries. And for the first time in months, he felt purpose again. He whispered to himself, almost like a prayer. No one touches that girl again. The evening air in Dallas had turned heavy again, thick with the smell of rain-soaked concrete and gasoline. A neon sign from an auto shop flickered weakly across the street, painting the puddles in red and blue streaks. Jack Turner crouched behind a row of dented dumpsters, eyes fixed on the old warehouse Maria Santos had told him about. The building stood like a rusted skeleton, corrugated metal sides streaked with age, windows boarded from the inside. Faint yellow light bled from the cracks, and the low hum of machinery pulsed in the distance. Ranger crouched beside him, perfectly still, the fur on his shoulders bristling slightly. The dog's ears twitched at every distant sound, water dripping, a truck backfiring, footsteps echoing somewhere deep inside. Jack scanned the perimeter through a small pair of night binoculars. 2 men guarded the entrance, both armed. One was Clint Mercer, a lanky man in his 40s with stringy blonde hair and a scar slicing down from his left temple to his jaw. His eyes were small and restless. The kind of eyes that had seen too many deals go bad. He wore a denim jacket soaked dark at the collar from sweat, a half-smoked cigarette dangling from his lips. Beside him stood Reggie Cole, thicker and younger, maybe mid-30s, with a shaved head and a tattoo of a snake curling up his neck. Reggie shifted from foot to foot impatiently, tapping the butt of his pistol against his thigh, bored but tense. Jack whispered, "Two outside, probably more inside. Smells like diesel, generator power. Something's running." Ranger responded with a faint huff, eyes narrowing toward the back of the building. Jack followed his gaze and noticed it, a secondary door, smaller, near the loading bay. Perfect. He moved like he had in the old days, low, precise, every step measured. The rain muffled his movement, and Ranger stayed close, silent shadow against steel. Near the rear entrance, a rusted chain lock hung loosely across the handle. Jack pulled a small multi-tool from his belt and snapped it with quiet efficiency. Inside, the warehouse opened into a cavernous space of shadows and echoing drips. The hum he'd heard outside grew louder, and the faint metallic scent of oil and solvent hung thick in the air. He ducked behind a stack of crates marked City Utilities Department. They weren't filled with pipes or tools. He pried one open just enough to see. Inside were envelopes of cash, stacked in rubber bands, and folders stamped with property records. His jaw tightened. This wasn't a simple slush fund. It was a full-scale operation. Bribes, seized properties, laundering through fake maintenance projects. Detective Raleigh's fingerprints were everywhere. Footsteps echoed from a metal staircase above. Jack froze. Two men were descending, their voices sharp and low. One of them was unmistakable even from here. Ray Haskins. His swagger was different now, less rage, more fear masked by bravado. His cheek was still swollen, from the diner fight, but his eyes burned with vengeance. The man beside him was new. Eddie Vaughn, mid-50s, slick dark hair graying at the temples, thin-lipped and sharp-nosed. He wore a tailored black jacket, no badge but the posture of authority. His hands were clean, his voice calm, the kind of man who never got his hands dirty but built his life on those who did. Ray snarled, "They took the girl. That's my problem. That seal's sticking his nose in." Eddie smirked, then cut it off, but carefully. "The chief wants no noise. We'll move the girl before morning. She's leverage now. The foster woman doesn't know what she's holding." Jack's chest went cold. They're going after Eleanor and Lila. He reached for his phone, texting Maria one word: "Move." Then, a soft metallic clink betrayed him, a loose wrench sliding from the crate beside him. The noise echoed like thunder. Ray spun around. "Who's there?" The next second erupted in motion. Jack rolled from cover just as gunfire tore through the air. Ranger lunged, slamming into Ray's legs and taking him down hard. Jack fired once, controlled, precise, hitting the light overhead. The warehouse plunged into semi-darkness. He darted toward the side exit, dragging Ranger by the collar. Bullets sparked against metal beams behind him, each ricochet a deadly reminder of how quickly control could turn to chaos. Outside, he dove behind a forklift, breathing hard. Ray's voice bellowed through the rain. "You think this is over, soldier? You don't know what you're in." Jack muttered, "I never do. I just finish it." He slipped away through the back alley, Ranger following close, their figures swallowed by the night. By the time the police sirens wailed in the distance, no doubt called by Raleigh's people, the warehouse was already clearing out. Trucks sped away carrying crates of evidence Jack couldn't stop. But he had seen enough. He had names, faces, proof, and now he knew their plan. At dawn, Jack returned to Eleanor Pike's house. The old woman was already on the porch, robe tied tight, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. "I didn't sleep," she said softly. "Something felt wrong." "You were right," Jack replied, scanning the horizon. "They're coming for her. We move now." Inside, Lila sat clutching Ranger's old dog tag, the one Jack had given her the day before. Her eyes were wide but calm, trusting. Jack knelt beside her. "You're going on a little trip, all right? Somewhere safe." "Will you come too?" she asked. He hesitated. "I'll be close." Maria arrived minutes later, driving an unmarked sedan. She wore plain clothes, jeans, leather jacket, badge clipped inside her pocket. Her expression was tight, the kind of look people wear when doing something that might cost them everything. "I got clearance for a temporary protection order under juvenile law," she said quickly. "It'll buy us 12 hours. After that, I'm out of authority and out of excuses." Jack nodded. 12 hours is enough." They loaded Lila into the car. Ranger hopped in beside her, tail wagging slightly, sensing her fear. Eleanor pressed a trembling hand to the window. "Be safe, child." Maria drove off into the morning fog, and Jack stayed behind, watching until the car disappeared. Then he turned toward the horizon where the warehouse lay hidden behind the industrial district. He knew what he had to do next. By afternoon, he was back at Cobalt Street, this time with a plan. He approached the now deserted warehouse, slipping through the same side entrance. Inside, everything was gone except the hum of a lone generator. On the wall near the office, a map of Dallas had been pinned, red circles drawn around various properties. At the center of them all, one mark stood out: Blue Star Diner. Jack stared, realization dawning. The diner wasn't just a random place. It was the front, the hub where the operation began. The same place Lila had been beaten was where the network laundered its money. And now he knew who else was tied to it. The signature on the property deeds scrawled across the files said, E. Vaughn. He picked up one of the files, tucked it into his jacket, and walked out. The sun was bleeding gold through storm clouds, and the sound of sirens echoed somewhere far away. Dallas was waking to another hot, restless day. But for Jack Turner, the war had already begun. The sun fell heavy over Dallas that afternoon, baking the streets until they shimmered like molten brass. The Blue Star Diner, once a haven for tired workers, now carried a new kind of tension. Windows shuttered halfway, laughter gone from the tables. Jack Turner parked 2 blocks away, watching through binoculars. The diner was no longer just a place. It was a front, the pulsing heart of Eddie Vaughn's laundering network. He could see 2 new guards posted at the rear door, their silhouettes backlit by the dying sun. Inside, figures moved like restless shadows. Ranger sat beside him, ears erect, tail still. Jack placed a hand on the dog's head. "If things go south, we go fast." He'd already arranged for Maria Santos to meet him in 20 minutes. She had managed to pull a few sympathetic officers from another district, men not on Vaughn's payroll. Jack knew this was the last chance to bring the network down before Lila or Eleanor became collateral damage. He adjusted the pistol at his hip, a habit that felt both old and unwelcome. Inside the diner, Eddie Vaughn stood near the counter, speaking quietly into a phone. His posture was relaxed, but his voice cold. "I want the girl found before sundown. No witnesses." His calmness made his words more dangerous. Across from him, Detective Raleigh looked uneasy. Sweat pooled beneath his collar, and his left hand trembled slightly. Vaughn noticed. "You're nervous, Frank. Don't be. We've done this before. Raleigh forced a nod, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. You don't understand. Turner isn't like the others. He's military. He's trained. Vaughn's lips curled. Then he'll die efficiently. Meanwhile, Maria arrived at the rendezvous point, wearing plain clothes again. Her hair was tied tight, a baseball cap pulled low. She brought along Officer Tom Briggs, a young cop in his late 20s, broad shoulders, short brown hair, and a quiet demeanor. Tom had joined the force straight out of college, idealistic and honest, but months under Raleigh's leadership had left him disillusioned. When Maria told him the truth, he hadn't hesitated. We get one shot at this, she said. You trust Turner? Tom asked. I trust his intentions, she replied, and that's enough. They moved quickly to position, Tom near the back entrance with a body cam, Maria covering the front. Jack approached through the alley, his footsteps silent, his mind already calculating angles. Ranger crept beside him, muzzle low, every muscle coiled. Jack glanced through a side window. Vaughn and Raleigh stood by the counter. A third man, Gideon Holt, Vaughn's enforcer, leaned against the wall. Gideon was huge, bald, his neck thicker than most men's thighs. His arms were sleeved in tattoos of serpents and crosses. A veteran of prison fights, he carried violence like perfume. Jack whispered to Ranger, "Stay close." Then he slipped inside through the rear kitchen door, moving past stacked boxes of sugar and syrup. The hum of a refrigerator masked his approach. He peered into the dining area. Maria was already there, blending in as a customer, hand near her concealed weapon. Vaughn poured himself coffee, speaking casually. You know, Raleigh, the problem with men like Turner is they still believe in right and wrong. They don't understand the gray. Jack stepped into view. I see plenty of gray, Vaughn, mostly in your hair. The room froze. Vaughn didn't even flinch. He set his cup down slowly. Mr. Turner, you should have stayed in whatever hole you crawled from. Raleigh's hand twitched toward his gun, but Maria shouted, Drop it! She aimed squarely at him. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Gideon lunged. The giant crashed through a table, swinging a heavy wrench. Jack dodged, the metal grazing his shoulder. Ranger leapt, jaws clamping onto Gideon's arm, dragging him down. Chairs splintered. Maria fired once, hitting Raleigh in the leg. He howled and fell, clutching his thigh. Vaughn tried to flee through the back, but Tom blocked his way, weapon raised. Dallas PD, drop it! Vaughn smirked. You think you're saving this city? Son, the rot's deeper than you can dig. He raised a hidden pistol, but before he could fire, Jack tackled him, driving him into the counter. The gun skittered away. Vaughn struggled, his breath ragged, eyes wild with disbelief that power had failed him. Jack pressed him down, forearm to throat. You built your kingdom on fear. Now it's collapsing. Outside, sirens wailed, Maria's backup finally arriving. Within minutes, the diner was surrounded. Vaughn, Raleigh, and Gideon were handcuffed, their empires reduced to broken furniture and evidence bags. Maria walked over, brushing glass from her jacket. You okay? She asked. Jack nodded, checking Ranger's flank. The dog was unhurt, his fur matted with dust, but his eyes alive with focus. As officers swarmed the scene, Jack stepped outside into the cooling twilight. The streetlights flickered to life, casting long golden reflections on the wet pavement. Maria joined him. It's over, she said. Jack shook his head. Not yet. Not until the girl's safe for good. Back at Eleanor Pike's house that evening, the old woman sat on the porch, watching the horizon with Lila beside her. The girl held Ranger's tag tight in her hand. When Jack and Maria arrived, Lila ran to him. "You came back," she said softly. Jack smiled, weary but sincere. "Told you I'd be close." Eleanor looked at Maria. "The men responsible?" Maria nodded. "In custody, and the state's taking over the investigation. There'll be trials, maybe even headlines." For the first time in days, Jack allowed himself to breathe. The rain had started again. Light, cleansing. Ranger sat at his feet, gazing out at the street like a sentinel. Jack knew the world would never be free of men like Vaughn, but he also knew the city had found something stronger than fear, a reason to stand again. Lila climbed onto the porch railing, watching the drops fall. "It sounds like the sky's washing away the bad things," she said. Jack smiled faintly. Maybe it is. And for one brief, fragile moment, Dallas felt clean. The night after the raid was unlike any other Dallas had known that summer. Eerily quiet, as if the city itself were holding its breath. The storm had passed, leaving puddles that reflected the amber glow of streetlights. Jack Turner stood outside the Blue Star Diner, now cordoned off with yellow tape, the hum of police radios fading as the last units withdrew. The place that had begun in violence and ended in justice was finally still. Ranger sat by his feet, muzzle flecked with rain, his amber eyes watching every flicker of motion. Jack's shirt was torn at the shoulder, bandaged where Gideon's wrench had grazed him. His face bore the calm exhaustion of a man who had fought too long and lost too much. But this time, perhaps, for something that mattered. Maria Santos joined him, her jacket damp, hair untied and sticking slightly to her face. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by quiet disbelief. "They're gone," she said softly. "Vaughn, Raleigh, Gideon, they're all in custody. Federal agents are taking over by morning." Jack nodded but didn't look at her. "Justice moves slow," he murmured, "but at least it moves." Maria watched him for a long moment, reading the weariness in his posture. "You did what the system wouldn't," she said. "Don't forget that." He gave a faint smile. "You're part of that system. Maybe it's not broken, just needs better people." A sedan pulled up across the street. A man stepped out, tall, lean, in his late 40s. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loose, but his eyes sharp and awake. Special Agent Nathan Cole from the FBI's Dallas field office had been assigned to oversee the aftermath. His dark skin and neatly cropped hair gave him an air of composure, but the faint scar on his chin hinted at field experience, not just desk work. He extended his hand to Jack. "Agent Cole," he said evenly. "We've reviewed the preliminary report. Without your interference, this city would still be bleeding money into Vaughn's pocket." Jack shook his hand. "Interference is an ugly word, Agent." Cole gave a half-smile. "Maybe, but effective." Maria handed Cole a folder thick with statements and photos. Every piece of evidence from tonight, recordings, witness statements, property ledgers. It's enough to take Vaughn down for good. Cole nodded, flipping through a few pages. "And the girl?" "Safe," Jack said before Maria could answer. "She and her guardian are under state protection. They won't be touched." Cole looked at him, studying the steel behind his words. "You're not planning to leave it at that, are you?" Jack met his gaze. "I don't start things I can't finish." The agent didn't argue. He'd seen that look before, in soldiers who carried justice like a personal debt. Across town, at Eleanor Pike's house, the night was softer. The rain had washed the streets clean, and the faint sound of crickets returned. Eleanor, wrapped in a shawl, watched Lila sleeping on the couch. The child's breathing was steady now, her small hand clutching Ranger's spare tag like a charm. Eleanor's eyes were tired but peaceful. She hadn't felt safe in weeks, but she knew the tide had turned. When she heard the knock on the door, her heart jumped. But it was Jack, standing on the porch with Ranger beside him. He looked like a man caught between war and peace. "Everything's done?" Eleanor asked. "Almost," he said. "I just wanted to make sure you both were all right." She led him inside. The warm lamplight softened the lines on her face. "You've done more than any of us expected," she said gently. "You could rest now." Jack smiled faintly. "Resting never suited me." Ranger wandered over to the couch and lay beside Lila. The girl stirred, mumbling something in her sleep. His name. Jack's expression softened, the weight in his eyes momentarily lifting. Eleanor watched him quietly. "You lost someone once, didn't you?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "My wife, Afghanistan. I promised her I'd stop fighting, but I didn't know how." Eleanor's voice was kind but firm. "Fighting isn't always violence, Jack. Sometimes it's just refusing to let the darkness win." He looked at her, and for the first time in years, he understood what she meant. The mission had ended, but something deeper had begun. Early morning light crept through the curtains, painting gold over the floorboards. Jack stepped outside again, Ranger at his side. The air smelled of wet soil and new beginnings. Down the street, Maria's car pulled up. She stepped out, holding 2 cups of coffee. "For the road," she said. Jack accepted it, leaning against the railing. "FBI's moving fast," she added. "Cole says Vaughn's singing already. Turns out he was connected to contractors in 3 states. This whole thing might break bigger than we thought." Jack sipped his coffee, nodding. "Corruption's like mold. It grows in the dark." Maria glanced toward the house. "What about the girl?" "She stays with Eleanor," Jack said. "I'll check in when I can. She deserves normal." Maria smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who believes in happy endings." Jack shrugged. "I believe in earned ones." They stood in silence, watching dawn burn away the last traces of night. When Maria finally left, Jack knelt beside Ranger. "We did good, boy," he said quietly. The dog wagged his tail once, pressing his head against Jack's arm. Later that day, as news broke across the city, the headlines spoke of corruption exposed, officers arrested, and a mysterious veteran who refused to be named. But in a quiet corner of Dallas, a girl laughed for the first time in months, a sound bright enough to cut through every scar the city had left behind. As Jack drove away down the empty highway, the rising sun glared against the windshield. Ranger leaned out the coke window, the wind catching his fur. Jack's reflection in the glass showed a faint smile. The road ahead was uncertain, but for once he didn't mind not knowing where it led. He'd done what he came for. Justice had found its way home. Sometimes God doesn't send angels with wings. Sometimes he sends a weary soldier, a loyal dog, or a kind stranger. People who step into the darkness and hold the light steady for the rest of us. In a world that often forgets compassion, that small act of courage becomes the greatest miracle of all. Jack Turner didn't just rescue a child. He reminded us that faith isn't about waiting for divine intervention, but becoming the answer to someone's prayer. Just like him, each of us carries a spark of God's mercy, something powerful enough to turn pain into purpose and fear into hope. When you forgive, protect, or love someone who can't repay you, that's God working through your hands. When you choose kindness over indifference, that's His voice whispering in your heart. Because miracles aren't rare, They happen every day, through people who still believe. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Tell us in the comments which moment spoke to your soul the most. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and redemption.